What are the 11 most common and costliest mistakes that cruisers make, and how can you avoid them? I'm Gary Bembridge. This is another of my tips for travelers. Cruisers make a lot of mistakes that cost them a huge amount of money. You're about to discover what they are, and more importantly, how you can avoid or mitigate against them. The first of these is the following: not having travel insurance. A lot of people go on cruises and they don't see the need for travel insurance. However, if something goes wrong, it could cost you an enormous amount of money, many thousands and thousands of dollars of cost. It's worth taking out a travel insurance policy. It's not going to cost that much in the scheme of things, but if you fall ill on the ship and they force you to disembark, all the costs are yours, of the hotels, the hospitals, getting back home. None of us plan to fall ill or have something happen to us when we're on vacation. However, if it does, the costliest mistake you could ever make is not having travel insurance. One of the biggest on-costs on a cruising vacation is excursions. You could be spending $100 to $200 per person per day on excursions. So one of the costliest things you could do is not look at the alternatives, even if you end up going with the cruise line. Some of the things that I love to do is hop on, hop off buses. They're really inexpensive. They'll often come to the cruise port and they give you commentary and they take you around and normally bring you back to the cruise port. So hop on, hop off buses, great alternative to look at. Secondly, there are independent providers that will provide very similar excursions to the cruise lines, normally for much less and with smaller groups. A lot of those will also build in guarantees that if they don't get you back to the ship in time, they will cover the cost of you catching up with the ship. The other thing to bear in mind is most cruise lines will have port talks, port guides, and a lot of the ports will have tourist information desks at the port. So one of the costliest things you can do is not look at alternatives to cruise line vacations. It could save you a lot of money and you could do some amazing and very different things. One of the costliest mistakes that you could make is not switching the roaming off on your mobile phone. If your phone connects to foreign countries, networks where you don't have a deal with your provider, or it even connects to the ship maritime system, you could find you're spending $6 per megabyte, you're spending 75 cents to $1 per call. It could cost you an enormous amount of money, particularly if you've got apps running in the background. So really important, when you're on a cruise, switch off roaming and rely on Wi-Fi. Saying that, also be extremely cautious about being connected on a cruise. Most cruise lines charge for Wi-Fi. It could cost you anything from 40 cents up to 75 cents or more per minute. If you want to mitigate or get around that, you can of course buy packages. However, you could easily be spending $200 for one device across a week-long excursion. How do you get around that? Well, a couple of things you do. You either just, when you are sailing at night, you accept you're not going to be connected and save that money. So when you get to port, you can either use the port Wi-Fi or coffee shop's Wi-Fi. Or what you could do is choose a cruise line which includes Wi-Fi. So for example, I'm actually recording this on board Saga Cruises. They include Wi-Fi. New Virgin Voyages includes Wi-Fi. Many of the premium lines include Wi-Fi within the fare. I think increasingly we're going to find the demand and pressure by cruisers, because they want to be connected, is Wi-Fi costs are coming down. Another really costly mistake could be buying a drinks package. I have a whole series of videos about drinks packages which go into this in more detail. However, drinks packages could cost you anything between $60 and $100 per day. You have to drink a huge amount to really make them worthwhile. So actually one of the things I recommend is avoid the drinks packages and buy drinks ad hoc. You find you're probably going to drink less, you're going to spend less, and you're going to save more money. Drinks packages could be very costly. In my view, avoid them. One of the costly mistakes that some cruisers have made is not paying attention to what is ship time and all aboard time. Don't let your phone automatically find the time zone. Manually set it to wherever you are, because you could find that ship time and the local destination time are different times. If you miss the all aboard time and you're not on a ship excursion, the ship will leave without you. They do not wait for passengers that come back late. The only exception to that is if you are on one of their organized excursions. So if you don't pay attention to the time, you haven't made sure that your mobile phone is on ship time, and you miss it, you could end up being one of those people that appear in videos running down the quayside as the ship pulls away. Very importantly, make sure you're on ship time and you know what the all aboard time is to avoid the costly mistake of trying to get yourself to the ship at the next port. Another way of avoiding a really costly mistake on a cruise is to take this with you. This is the daily program. On the daily program, it will always be either the ship telephone number or the port agent. Really important either take that with you, or what I do is I take a photograph every night when I get the daily program. So I have a picture on my phone of the port agent. This is really important because if you get lost, something happens, you have an accident, or perhaps you miss the back time on an excursion and the guide or the bus leaves without you, you know who to contact to make sure, first of all, what is the exact right port you need to go back to and how to get there. And also to alert the ship that you have a problem, whatever that may be, whether it's an injury or you're just running late. There is a small chance that if you're running late, the ship will wait for you. So I've been on a cruise, in fact, the last cruise I was on, where a couple had got separated and lost from an excursion. And they didn't have the port details with them. They found a taxi, it cost them hundreds of dollars. They actually went to the wrong port. There was more than one port. And eventually they did manage to track down somebody who managed to contact the ship. But it was a very convoluted and very expensive process. There were many hundreds of dollars out of pocket, embarrassed, and they just made it eventually to the ship on time. So always have that with you. It's an absolute great insurance policy if anything happens. If you are a solo traveler, so you travel on trips by yourself, one of the costly mistakes you can make is go on a ship that doesn't have solo cabins, or you go on a ship which isn't promoting and offering low supplements. I often travel by myself on cruises, and one of the things I do if I'm booking is I look for two things. First of all, I look for ships and itineraries that have solo cabins. And also what I tend to do even more is for all the cruise lines or routes that I want to go, I keep an eye out and set up alerts and talk to the agents about alerting me when that cruise line is doing low or no single supplements. You'll find many of the big cruise lines will offer that. So I'm on Saga at the moment. They have 109 solo cabins. I think something like 20% of the ship is solo cabins. Most new ships when they come into service nowadays have solo cabins because it's a big growing demographic. But other ships, so for example, the last cruise I was on was Seabourn. They don't have solo cabins, but throughout the year on different itineraries, they slash the single supplement right down to either no or very low supplements. So one way of avoiding a huge big cost if you're a solo traveler is make sure that you follow either ships with solo cabins or you look and alert and talk to your agent about making sure you know when there are low single supplements. A really costly mistake you could make is by not washing your hands. If norovirus breaks out on a ship and you get it, you will find that you are quarantined to your cabin till it passes, and it's a pretty miserable experience. You've spent all this money, you've saved up, you've gone on your vacation, and you could spend it feeling really lousy and confined to your cabin. The way that you can stop norovirus is by washing your hands with soap and water, also additionally using the hand gel. But the real big thing is washing your hands regularly with soap and water. The little tip that one of the captains once gave me is as you wash your hands, sing to yourself, happy birthday. That's long enough to do a really good job. If you don't, you could have a really miserable time and it could be very, very costly because you're basically throwing away all of your cruise money by being quarantined. For me, one of the biggest mistakes that people make and one of the costliest mistakes they make is by choosing the wrong cruise line. So for example, I've been on a cruise with people who hated dressing up, but they were on a Cunard cruise on a transatlantic where there were many nights formal, where you're expected to wear dark suit and tie, tuxedo, beautiful gowns. And the people on the cruise hated dressing up. So they're on a cruise for 7 days doing the thing that they hated enormously. I've been on other cruises where people don't like lots of rowdy partying, and they've been on fun cruise lines with lots of partying, belly flop competitions and rowdy parties around the pool because it was a cheap cruise. So really, one of the costliest mistakes you can make is to go on the wrong cruise line. If it's not a cruise line that's perfect for your style of cruising, you are wasting your money on a cruise. So really do your research and importantly, work with an agent to help you make sure you get on the right cruise line. Following on from that, there's another really big mistake you can make, and that's by not choosing the right cabin for you. Now, a lot of people like guaranteed cabins because you pay the lowest fare for a grade and then the cruise line allocates the cabin. Now, that's great if you're not bothered about where the cabin is located, the shape of the cabin, if it's a little bit quirky or unusual. However, if you're a little bit like me and you like a really quiet cabin, you don't like to be by any noisy areas or late night venues, then I like to choose my own cabin and I'm happy to pay a slight premium for that. My little tip is, if you are worried about cabins, is choose cabins that are surrounded on all sides by cabins. So above you, below you, to the left, to the right, and ideally opposite you are cabins. That's going to be the quietest, calmest cabin that you like to get. And also, importantly, when you're still choosing a cabin, make sure it doesn't have an interconnecting door so you're not getting in noise from next door. One of the costliest mistakes that people make on a cruise is they find themselves in a cabin which they're unhappy with because it's too noisy, or it's near some disruption, or they don't get the night's sleep that they want. If you don't mind that, of course, then it's fine, but it could be a really costly mistake. Understand what's important to you in your cabin and make sure that you do whatever it takes to get that cabin. Another really costly mistake that I see cruisers make, particularly when they're heading to countries they're not familiar with, is not really understanding what the exchange rate is and also not understanding what the charges are for using their credit or debit cards. It's very easy to get confused, and a lot of the markets and stall holders in places where there's lots of cruise ships coming, particularly if they know there's lots of foreigners, will bamboozle you and confuse you by exchange rates. So really make sure that you understand the exchange rate. Of course, one of the things to do nowadays with mobile phones is lots of apps that work without using data that will convert currencies for you very simply and easily. But really make sure that you understand the exchange rate, because I have seen lots of people ending up paying what ends up being the equivalent of hundreds of dollars for something that's not worth it. Also, before you go, make sure you understand the charges, if any, that your credit card or debit card is going to do. So a lot of the debit cards and credit cards charge a foreign transaction fee, and these can mount up and be fairly significant. Also, the exchange rate that you may get is not always a great exchange rate. So sometimes it's better to actually have taken cash with you, or one of those cards where you've loaded up cash, so you're not going to be affected by a bad exchange rate by using your card. Those are some of the big and most costliest mistakes that I see cruisers making, with some ideas and suggestions on how you can avoid them or mitigate them. I hope that's been helpful. If it has, why not watch one of my many other videos of cruising tips and advice right now.